that this is, he said, you know, let's not mince words. This would be a military action. So the question is, what does the president think about that? Now, we're only going to get one chance at this. After the president of Mexico speaks, the U.S. side will get one question, and it is expected to be about Libya. But everything that the president said, sure, except for the flights that he has allowed the military to conduct, all of that is pretty much what we've heard from the administration up to this point.
What do you think they'll make of Hugo Chavez from Venezuela, his proposal to try and bring about some kind of peace talks? Will that be taken seriously, do you think?
No, I don't think that they'll probably try not to talk about that. Obviously, their relationship with Hugo Chavez is not one that they want to highlight. They don't want to see him as a peacemaker. I think, though, behind the scenes, that the U.S. government would tell you anything that could get Muammar Gaddafi to leave Libya would be welcome, but I don't think there's any thought here in Washington that he will leave willingly. So I don't think that they'll go out of their way to talk about a peace offering from Venezuela.
Can we go back to that no-fly zone and why it is such a sticking point? Defense Secretary Robert Gates said that basically this would require attacking Gaddafi's government. Do you think that's what is the worry here? I mean, the U.S. obviously doesn't want to get involved in another war.
That, I think, is obviously the concern from the military. Their goal here is to tell the president just what their forces can do. They feel stretched already in Iraq and Afghanistan. They are concerned about what it could mean if it escalated in Libya. Now, the Secretary of Defense was very careful to say this would need more than just one aircraft carrier, which I believe that they could soon move in to the area. So he's saying that we would need more support. Of course, the administration has been saying all along, this will not be a unilateral action. We will not go it alone. We would need NATO support, and obviously there are NATO airfields all throughout Italy that could be used in any sort of no-fly zone. I think the bigger concern is the message that this would send to the Arab world if American munitions were to be dropped again in an Arab country. They're afraid it would go into Gaddafi's, what he's been saying is that this is, you know, outsiders trying to stir up trouble, that they're afraid it would delegitimize the protesters and the opposition movement at this point.
But you say that U.S. military assets are being moved around Libya.
Well, what they've sent in right now are 2 amphibious ready ships, and these are the things that we saw in Haiti. I've spent a lot of time on these amphibious ships. They have some Marines on board, but they don't have a full contingent of Marines, so it wouldn't be used as any sort of landing force that would take thousands of Marines. They only have a few hundred on board. What these platforms are able to do is they've got helicopters and they've got cargo room, so they can serve as sort of a launch pad, a lily pad, if you will, from air bases, dropping off humanitarian relief, and they have those amphibious ships that can get to the beach to drop off aid. So I think the reason you've seen the humanitarian aid ships move before the aircraft carriers, obviously that is what the president is focusing on right now, that the U.S. is looking towards humanitarian relief before any sort of military action. But again, it'll depend on the question that is about to be posed to him.
And of course, the U.S. has to play a very subtle game as far as the humanitarian assistance is concerned. Barack Obama saying a little bit earlier in the press conference that he was sending civilian planes. A lot of people are concerned that once you start ramping up the humanitarian effort, this is often a precursor to sending in a military presence in the country.
And that, of course, is the concern that we're hearing from the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. Now, he did say that U.S. military aircraft could be used, but that, again, was just to go between Tunisia and Egypt. I don't think he's talking at all about going into Libya. One of the concerns, and one thing you haven't heard addressed at all, is who the aid is going to get to. Right now, they are just focusing on getting aid to the refugees in Tunisia and in Egypt. But what are they going to do for those people who are still in Libya? Now, they've said that they're not ruling out any options. So does that mean they're considering sending arms to the opposition? Now, some in the U.S. Senate have said that's exactly what the U.S. needs to do. And this administration hasn't ruled it out. But the important thing, again, is going to be, what does the president want? We have heard very different things from his cabinet. We've seen very public division. So the question is, where does President Barack Obama stand on this? And the White House has been very careful to make sure that the president isn't accountable to the media throughout this past week. This is the first time we're getting a chance to ask him any questions since Libya really erupted. And like I said, that's just one question, and in just one question, it's pretty easy to dodge.
Okay, Patty, let's leave it there for the moment. I'll come back to you after we've heard that question. We are waiting for Barack Obama to answer a question about Libya. He's in a press conference at the moment with his Mexican counterpart, Felipe Calderon. They're talking about all sorts of issues about the cooperation between them in fighting drugs, and we're going to be speaking about that a little bit later on. But we are waiting right now for that Libyan question. In the meantime, let's go back to Doha.
Jane, many thanks. Of course, we will go straight back to the White House as and when that question about Libya arises. Also, just ahead on this news hour, planting the seeds of unrest in the Middle East. Why food prices have climbed to unprecedented highs. And a miraculous reawakening, how doctors saved this baby by freezing his brain. While we wait for the president to return to the subject of Libya, let's remind you of our top stories. Forces loyal to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi have launched fresh airstrikes on the eastern town of Brega. The rebels say that they've pushed government supporters back. And the International Criminal Court says that it'll investigate the Libyan leader, some of his sons and his inner circle for possible crimes against humanity. Another new Prime Minister for Egypt. After the man appointed by former President Hosni Mubarak quits, Essam Sharaf now has the task of forming a new cabinet and leading the government back to civilian rule. Joining us now live from London is author and Egypt expert Tarek Osman, who's just returned from Cairo after witnessing the protests there. Tarek Osman, I apologise in advance if we have to break away from you to go back to the White House, but tell me what you think of the Prime Minister's, in inverted commas, resignation and the appointment of the new Prime Minister in Egypt.
Thank you for having me. I don't think it's a resignation. I think it's a decision from the Supreme Council, mainly to appease the masses who have made it very clear that they see Shafiq as part of the Mubarak administration. But overall, I don't think this is a decision that will have any impact, really, on the future of the country over the next few years.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because effectively what we have now is a political void. The regime that has, or the administration that has ruled Egypt for the past 30 years is out. The country now is in the hands of the Supreme Council, who declared repeatedly that they are an interim administration or management. The contenders for the future of Egypt, whether the military, which effectively was the backbone of the regime for the past 60 years, or the liberals, or political Islam, the interaction between these three forces will shape Egypt tomorrow, but not who is the Prime Minister for the next few months.
We've talked about a lot on this programme about what's happening today in Libya. How does what's happening in Egypt stand as far as the future for the whole of the region, the democratic future of the whole of the region?
Extremely important, because if you look at the history of the region over the past 200 years, really, the political ideology dominant in Egypt, whether it was liberalism or Arab nationalism or Islamic radicalism, whatever the political ideology that came out of Egypt, they always resonated throughout the Middle East, throughout the Arab world. So whatever the shape of Egypt socio-politically over the next 2 or 5 years, that will have immense influence on the whole of the Arab world.
Okay, so in the near and mid-term, what are the important issues that we should be looking out for, the important developments in Egypt as we head towards elections?